Hi there, Chad here for Chibi AI. In this video, I want to show off this really cool technique, strategy, that is discussed in this paper here. They call it long writer. They also later describe it as agent writer. And it's a pretty interesting strategy here, I think, unlocked by some of the recent advancements in our AI models that make this something that is doable while also not costing an arm and a leg in token costs. And I'll show you what I mean here in just a moment. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to take this technique and I'm going to craft an action. Well, technically I've already crafted the action, but I will show you how this action was created that mimics the strategy here to create an interesting fiction writing action that might help you craft some drafts of a scene or a chapter to help you come up with ideas or even parts of it to use in your own stories as you write. So I'm just going to go down here to page 4. This is really the important page here for this technique. The other pages kind of elaborate on this, but this is what we need. Let's see if we can zoom in here just a little bit more. And here we go. So what's going on here? If you've never looked at one of these papers before and seen these types of drawings, it might be a little bit confusing, but this is actually a pretty simple one. Here's what's going on. We have up here in the top left, we have instruction, right? So this is something that you would write, you would give to the AI as what you want. In this case, they're asking for a 3,000 word article on the history of the Roman Empire. That's going to a large language model. This could be something like Google Gemini 1.5 Flash, OpenAI's GPT-4o. O1 would probably not. Well, parts of O1 would work really great for this, but O1 being a reasoning model, not generally great at writing fiction, but it could be good for planning. So, there's different parts that we could break this down into, but suffice it to say that it goes to a model. And that model can be whichever model you want. That would be things that you'd want to test when you're building something like this, because some models are better at different things and different models have a different sort of, I like to just say vibe, right? Because it's, you might give the same prompt to 2 or 3 or whatever different number of models, and they'll give you back a different result because no model is trained the same. Like even the difference between GPT-4o and 4o mini, things are trained differently and they just have different, I just call it a vibe, right? So find the model that vibes with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish and use that model for it. It's a pretty powerful capability inside of Chibi, and I'll show you that here in just a bit. So what is the LLM doing with this instruction? So first, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Remember, we said this is long writer, and I think by now, if you've used AI at all for writing and you've tried to do something like write a 5,000 word article about, and even if you gave it a ton of information, not just a simple prompt, it still would stop around, it would stop around 700 words maybe. Sometimes it would go a little gung-ho and give you 1,200 or something, but you never got a lot, right? There was just not really a way to do that in just like one prompt. And it's almost like AI models have like this resistance to writing a lot. And honestly, that's probably a good thing at this point, because one of the things that we need to be careful of is models will tend to stray, right? Like if they're trying to write a lot, they're kind of predicting next words and that kind of stuff that goes on technically behind the scenes with those things. What you'll find is when a model is asked to write a lot of text at once, starts off strong and then generally ends up kind of blabbing on a little bit, for lack of a better term, or even worse, sometimes just totally diverting and going off on a tangent and never to be recovered, right? So it's like half of the content or more is wasted anyways. So this strategy is meant to sort of overcome that limitation and give AI the ability to write more. And it's actually a pretty good technique. It's one that we probably would have tried 2 years ago if we didn't have such high token costs at the time. If you remember, AI writing apps and stuff were costing like 80, 90, 100 and something dollars a month, because behind the scenes they were trying to recoup the costs of those tokens that were being charged by like OpenAI and AI21 and these companies. But with the AI race going on, all these different models that are out there now, things like Gemini 1.5 Flash especially, I'll talk about that one a lot. That's one of my favorite models now, and I can't wait for Gemini 2.0 Flash to become a real model that's not under experimental access. But since we've got newer models and all that race to, I don't want to say race to the bottom. It's got a cost race to the bottom, so to speak, because models are getting cheaper and cheaper, but they're also getting more capable and capable. One of the other limitations that we used to have was that you could only give an AI model so much content at once. And that would mean you're kind of bottlenecked. And even then, that limitation is becoming less and less, because the Gemini model the Flash Gemini, the Flash version of the Gemini model can take in a 1 million context token input. The Pro version can take 2 million. And, for the most part, it will never even come close to that in most of our use cases. But the fact that it's there and we can now not worry about running into a context limit like that is a beautiful thing. Okay, so enough about the models. And the problem we're trying to solve is being able to write more than that sort of hidden limitation of what a model will put out. Plus, we want to make sure that we're always letting the model write its sweet spot, right? Like if it's good at writing 300, 400, 500 words before it, peters out, then we want to take advantage of just that anyways, right? We don't want lesser quality results. So how do we do that? What we do is we start breaking this down into steps, right? Which, of course, on the surface of things seems obvious, doesn't it? Right? It's like, oh, well, duh, you break it down and write each part. And I'll show you how we do that inside of Chibi. See over here, they call this agent write. I suspect that it's called agent write partly because they got this LLM here acting as sort of an orchestrator, where it's taking it, it's planning it, and writing it. So it's like doing these different tasks. So it's called an agent in that case. So what do we do? Step one is to plan. And the interesting thing about their plan is that it also provides a little bit of meta information. So we want actually this is a 30,000 word, sorry, let me rephrase that. They want a 30,000 word article, which is definitely far and beyond what a normal AI prompt would ever produce. And so what do? We break it down into steps. Right? In this case, they're breaking it down into paragraphs. So we got paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 15, all the way down to 15. Essentially, what is going on is step 1, this AI model is breaking down their instruction into a series of paragraph sort of mini prompts. Essentially, what it's doing is it's saying in paragraph 1, we want to introduce the origins of the Roman Empire, including, and they got some more context that they would have in here. And then they state that it should be around the 700 words for that paragraph 1. That's a lot longer than a paragraph, but let's go on to the next one. Paragraph 2, it's going to describe the founding of the Roman Empire, and then we go on. And then paragraph 15, they say they're going to summarize the history of the Roman Empire in 500 words. Now you can imagine that there's 15 paragraphs. If you estimate that there's between 500 to 800 words per, that's how you reach your word goals, right? Now, it's important to note that this isn't something that you write out yourself, right? This is called agent write here because this LLM is actually creating this plan first based on your instruction. And while their instruction here is very simple, write a 30,000 word article on the history of the Roman Empire, what I would suggest is this instruction is where you get to drop in your own experience, your own knowledge about your topic, or if you're writing fiction, like I will show in my example, You might put in there things like your character and their antagonist and what's going on in sort of a general sense. The more you put in here, the more that this model has to work with when creating that plan, which means that the plan is better and you will ultimately end up with a better result, right? You also, this is where you get to make it more human. I mean, obviously the AI is going to be writing all the text, but this is where if you provide your nuance, like certain keywords that you like to use in a certain way, this is how you get to influence it to be something that's uniquely yours and not something that just anybody gets. Because if we use a prompt like this, write a 30,000 word article on the history of the Roman Empire, everybody can write that. Right? There's no nuance to this. There's no, special angle that you have on it because you have been studying the Roman Empire and you've got this unique twist or thought on it, or even just sort of a hypothesis or something. Since it's so generic, you're just going to get the generic result. But this instruction gives you the ability to inject yourself into this article or story or whatever it is you're trying to create. There's some other things I can show you instead of Chibi that will make this even better as well. Something that you can't do in other apps and tools, but will give you the ability to kind of make sure that it's doing things in a way that you like. Okay, so step one, right? We've got the plan now. We've got a certain number of paragraphs or sections or whatever you want to call these. This team calls theirs paragraphs. I think in mine I call it sections, but I'll show you in just a moment. So you've got this plan. Now what you need to do is start writing it. And so step two, that what the model is going to do is it's going to start with paragraph 1 and it's going to write it. Okay. Then it's going to move on to paragraph 2 and write that one. But at the same time that it's writing paragraph 2, it also sees paragraph 1. So if we move on, it's going to write paragraph 3, but it also sees paragraph 1 and 2, paragraphs 1 and 2, while it writes 3. And then 4 can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So in a sense, I often refer to this strategy as a context stacking or token stacking, if you will, because essentially every step that gets written, in this case, every paragraph that gets written, the paragraph that is currently being written sees the previously written ones. And they sort of, the context or the text kind of stacks upon itself. Now, why do we do this? Is so that if you think about it, like let's say that we give you an instruction. Like let's say I come up to you and I say, describe the founding of the Roman Empire in 800 words. I didn't tell you about paragraph 1. I don't tell you about paragraph 3 or anything like that. Now, obviously, we're not going to be telling the AI about paragraph 3 in the future of writing yet. But let's say I ask you to write this, but I don't tell you about this. What are the chances that you end up writing something that was possibly already written about in the first part, right? So one of the problems that we end up with if we try to break it down to where all we do is write the given instruction, you might end up in a situation where it starts sounding very repetitive because the AI doesn't know anything about the previously written stuff. So we stack and stack and stack until we get to the end. Now, if you're thinking this through, this might answer why this has been something that is a little bit difficult in the past because of a couple of things, right? One is the cost. We talked about that. At the time, a couple of years ago, this might have been a $5 click. If you run an action or this agent type thing and it writes out a 30,000 word article using this, that might have cost you $5, and at the time in the grand scheme of things, depending on what you're using that content for, $5 might not have been a lot for you. But $5 to get one bit of content from AI is, especially in today's standard, a lot. This would probably cost more like a penny or something now inside of using something like Gemini Flash. Maybe not even a penny. And the second problem was the context problem, right? Like if this keeps on stacking upon itself, you're going to start getting in, it might be 500 tokens, 1,000 tokens, 1,500 tokens, 2,000 tokens of input. At the time a couple years ago, it was like 4,000 something tokens of input that an AI model could take in. Then we started getting a little bit more. It was like 8,000, which is good. But, this stacking mechanism would eventually get to the point where you basically ran out of what you could send it. So then we would have to start taking these other strategies where we try and summarize the previously written stuff and break it down into a smaller main points kind of thing and pass just that. It just got a little ugly. But today, since we have models like Gemini Flash, we have the ability to just keep sending all that context, and it's not going to cost us a ton. It's actually going to cost us very, very little, like fractions and fractions of a penny. And so this becomes a more interesting strategy today when we have that kind of ability with the models to take in all the context we want and not cost a lot. Okay, so this is what we're going to try and build inside of Chibi, and we're going to build it in a way that helps us write a hard-boiled crime thriller story. So let's go over to Chibi. Here I am in a document that is just empty. I have no memory on this document. Memory is where we can put things like main character, antagonist, and scenes and all kinds of stuff. Just all the information that I want this to be aware of when I write. But right now it's blank. Don't need it. Okay, so I've got this action here that I created. It's called Long Writer, mimicking the name of it from the document, from the research paper. And we got three steps. Now, if we go back to this paper, basically we got 3 steps, right? They call it step 1 and step 2 is right. I call instruction step 1, and then we got step 2, step 3 inside of Chibi. So we got get the instructions. This is a type of task in Chibi that just pops up a box. And it's meant to just be a way for you to input what it is that you want. Now, if I go into the settings here, I already have a default value applied because this is just what I want it to write. Now, also note that I say write 10,000 word crime thriller. We generally don't get 10,000 words. So what I'm really aiming for is like 5, and I'll throw 10,000 in there as as what I want. I suspect that as Gemini models get better, like maybe 2.0, when it becomes something I can test, it might be where we hit these numbers more reliably, and then you would adjust your requests. I'm just throwing 10,000 in there right now because I want to see if we can get 5,000 out of it. Still, 5,000 in one go is a lot of text. Okay, so this is going to pop up. It's going to say enter the writing instruction you want long form content about, right? It's going to be pre-filled because I have a default value turned on and applied here. But just know that step 1 here is just meant as like an entrance into this action so that you can tell the action what it is that you want to write about so that it can perform that for you. Step 2, if we go into step 2, that's the plan. We need to break that instruction down into smaller parts so that the AI can act on each one individually. So we'll go to here, and this one might be a little daunting, but just think about it's basically taking the information, and this memory stack is not even necessary at this point. It's because I don't have anything in document memory. It's just here just in case I do have something in memory that I want to affect the plan. But essentially what's going on is we're taking those instructions. Notice that up here we have this variable called instructions. In fact, let me just go ahead and open this up. Down here, so one of the things about Chibi actions is when something happens inside of a task that is going to need to pass information down or along the chain, we call this a sequence, a chain of events, right? So we got 1, 2, 3. It's going to run from top to bottom. The information and context needs to flow down through the action, and we're able to name that context. So when I enter in information into the pop-up box, it's going to go into a variable called instructions that I can use later in my action. So when I open this up, I'm using it right here to provide the writing instructions that I want to the AI prompt. Additional context is just there, like I said. Right now it's actually doing nothing because I have nothing in my document memory. But in the case I did, it would get used as part of the plan. And what Chibi will do is he automatically cleans up empty XML tags like this, so you don't have to worry about that being in there. Okay, so now we just tell it, take your time, think step by step, the classic thing in prompting, right? We're going to break down those writing instructions into multiple subtasks so that they fulfill the writing instructions completely. You could probably start to stop here in some cases for this instruction, especially when smarter models, like if Gemini 2.0 might be possible. Or if you're using a more powerful model for the planning phase, your instructions can be different. We have a little bit more here though. Each subtask is going to guide the writing of one section of a story. Should include main points. This here is pretty important though. What I'm trying to do is make sure that what it does is it provides a section with a main point and a certain number of expected words for that point, just like we saw in this paper here, right? Word count requirement, 700 words. Here we got word count requirement, 400 words, but we're wrapping it in these like single brace tags, which is basically telling the AI, hey, feel free to change that to the content that we're expecting here. So this is just a formatting layout kind of thing, telling the AI how we want the result to be written so that the next step can take advantage of that. Okay, so now we've got make sure that each subtask is clear and specific. This is just some extra stuff. Do not break things down too finely. We don't want 1,000 small writing parts. We want 10 slightly larger or something, for example. There's no way that we don't want to build this action in a way that defines specifically the number. This is just us trying to guide the AI not to break it down too small. And then we don't want it to write anything else. We just want those sections. So that's our plan. Now this type of task here in Chibi is what we call a run prompt. So it'll run an AI prompt, generate the results, put it into the variable that we set it as. In this case, we set it, if we go into settings here, we set it as the plan. And that plan is basically the collection of all the sections that it plans out to fulfill our writing instructions. So we're going to take advantage of the plan here in just a moment. So we got use planned writing steps next. Now this is a special task that we call line by line. Excuse me. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through the plan basically one section at a time, and then write that section out. So this is what it looks like. When I open it up, you can see we have, looks like another subtask inside of here, and that's what we called it. So the line by line task has, what it does is it'll break the incoming information down line by line, in this case the plan. So it's going to break down the plan line by line, and then for each line it's going to run all the subtasks that are inside of it. Right now we only have one. It's the write the step task. So it's going to run however many times there are in the plan. Like, so for example, if the plan comes back with 10 steps, then this is going to run 10 times. And so what it'll do is it'll run once. The first section plan will go to write the step. That will get written to the document. Then this will go again, and section 2 will go to this write the step, and that'll write to the document. And then section 3, 4, 5, all the way to 10, right? The amount is based on what the plan actually comes up with, but that's the gist of it. This task's main job is to just go through each of those steps one by one from start to finish. And in so doing, it's giving that information to write the step in a variable we call step plan. So you can think of this as this part here, right? So we got the plans, we got paragraph 1. You can imagine paragraph 1 would be inside of this variable called step plan. that goes into here. So this is how we can use it. So we call this, so we have the original writing instructions in our prompt here. That's what this is. This is the information that we typed in at the beginning of this action as, what it is that we're looking for to be written. Then we have the next section writing plan. That's this step plan. That's like if you're in section 1 or section 2 or section 3, that would get written based on that would get put here so that the AI knows that it's writing what it is that it needs to write for that section. Sorry. And then we have the already written texts, and we call it the whole document variable, which is all the content in here. And this is the part where it's stacking, right? The part where I talked about in this paper, where after it writes, after it's written paragraph 1, it goes on, it's writing paragraph 2, but while it's writing paragraph 2, it sees paragraph 1 so that it doesn't repeat itself. That's what we're doing here. So all the content that keeps coming out in this document, it's going to write more. It's going to go on to the next step. It's going to write more. It's going on to the next step. It's going to write more. But at the same time, because of this, it's able to see all the content in the document so it doesn't become overly repetitive and stuff. Okay, then we have a little style section here because we wanted to use a hard-boiled style because that's what we're going to write. So this is a part where previously I said that you get to give it some instructions on how you want it to write and stuff. Now I put it directly in the prompt here, but you can also do that inside of the writing instructions. So see here that we're using Gemini Flash 1.5, and we can provide some instructions. And just as you're an excellent writing assistant, but you could put all that style stuff into here if you would prefer. It's really up to you. Probably would be better to put it here, but for purposes of the demo, we can just leave it here for now. But essentially, this is just some information that we want it to write in a real gritty, unsentimental style of writing. Strip away the pretty words, make every sentence hit concrete. Your characters are damaged goods. Just kind of a nice little roundup of what, what our version of hard-boiled might mean. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. Right, it's going to write out each section using a hard-boiled style. And it's going to be able to see the previous content as it writes. Now, it's kind of a long way of going through this action to explain it, but let's see what it looks like when it runs. So we're going to run this. We get that pre-filled information that I talked about, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to write a late 60s crime thriller story based on a character named Jack McCann. He's battling his arch nemesis, the architect who was responsible for his sister's death, and he's seeking revenge against the architect. So I want it to start the story with the end about to happen, where Jack appears. He's about to end the architect, but before he does, flashback to the beginning of where his sister dies, and he becomes a broken vigilante. Okay, good stuff. Now here is just to repeat it. Here, this is in this case, in particular, this action is designed for fiction. And this doesn't have to be fiction. If you change up the style and stuff like that in the action that I showed you, you can make this into an article writer and things like that. This instruction piece here, though, is where you get to infuse your additional information into it, though. And so I highly suggest that don't skimp on this part here. Give it as much as you can. The details do matter when the AI is planning out your writing or planning out the writing. And then we'll talk a little bit more about when the content is done. I'm just going to let this thing run. And you'll see that right now it's creating the plan. Once it's done creating that plan, it's going to move on to writing, and we'll start getting some content into here. Now, some of the writing skeptics, the AI, I don't want to use AI in writing, will see this and think, oh no, this is just a guide to show how to create AI generated content. And in some ways, I suppose you're right. It's not intended to be this. What I'm trying to do is showcase something that's an interesting angle that I came across when I was working with one of our writers. Is for them, they were having a difficult time with getting the AI to provide precisely kind of what they wanted. So when they came to me, one of the things that I kind of thought of was let's make it ask questions. This is typical stuff that we go through. Ask questions to help guide them with things that they might not have thought of originally in their writing and stuff, but it just wasn't clicking for them. So we came up with a strategy similar to this, where the writer was able to generate basically, almost in a sense, this is almost like a whole chapter for them. And of course, they didn't use this content as is, but they were able to read through it and get ideas for what it was that they might have done next in their story, or even things they wanted to go back and fix in their story. And it was kind of interesting because it just sort of plays to that we're all different, right? And maybe this is the strategy that works for you. And I don't want to be limiting anybody, because that's, I don't want to say like, oh, don't use AI this way. At the end of the day, what I'm hoping you do is, if you publish something that you're proud to put your name on and you want your readers to read, even if AI helped you write it, and it doesn't matter how much the AI helped you write it, if you infuse yourself into the process and you come up with something that you're proud to publish, at the end of the day, that's all we can ask for, right? Just take the time and always have the thought of trying to have some quality in the endeavor. And I think we'll be really good with using AI to do things like this. Now, we can read through this a little bit here. You can see we've got 6,000 something words written from that. So the rain hammered the corrugated iron roof of the backroom bar, a relentless tattoo against the throbbing bass of a jukebox, blasting some soul-drenched lament. It's coming on thick, isn't it? Neon signs flickered, casting sickly yellow hues on the chipped Formica tables. And Jack McCann, hunched over a glass of cheap whiskey, watched the rain-slick streets blur outside. The city, a concrete jungle, exhaled a sigh of damp desperation. He swore the air tasted like stale whiskey and regret. Just my type of crime thriller story start, right? That's pretty cool. Now, we go through this and we can see that we've even got some dialogue. We got some stuff from, some emotional type things where his hand is tightened around the chipped glass. But we got a ton of content that we can read through. If you're expecting to write out a chapter of your book and you're kind of stuck and you want some ideas, this might be a good strategy for you. Technically, what I wanted to go over with this is the strategy and technique of creating this action that performs what this paper has described. The ability for you to create lots of content in one run that solves a couple of main problems. Number one being the length problem, right? Where typically if you try to run a prompt, the AI would stop, right? It would just stop. There was almost nothing you could do. You could tweak and change your prompt to be like, I want 1,500 words, I want 3,000. You keep on changing things up and trying, you add more some context. And sometimes you'd be a little bit successful. You get maybe 1,200, 1,500 words. Sometimes maybe even 2,000 if you're super lucky. But single prompts don't really create effective content, right? You want just the real sweet spot for the model. And yet at the same time, you want a lot of content typically, or more content than was capable of. Don't necessarily have to be a lot, I suppose. And so this strategy kind of solves that, right? The second piece of that problem is that you want the AI to also remember what happened in the past in your writing. You don't want it forgetting, like in the case of this story. If up here we talked about the death of his sister and the memory of his jagged ice and all that and stuff, you down here at the end, you wouldn't want him, talking to his, I don't know what this section, I don't know why I highlighted that, but you wouldn't want him talking to his sister like she was alive, right? Like, cause she's not in the case of this story. But in some cases, if the AI was not aware of what was going on above, then we would end up with things like that, right? Where there was like a disconnect in the story because, wait a minute, how is he talking to his sister? She's not, she's no longer with us. Like, why is, that doesn't make any sense, right? Unless there was some sort of a flashback or something going on there. But at the same time, that would still need the AI to be aware that that was happening, right? So that's one of the important pieces that is solved by this as well. And that's from that stacking bit where it's able to see all the content before as it's writing the next part. So I hope that you found this interesting. It's a really powerful capability, especially with the latest updates and models that allow us to have the ability to run these things without costing us a ton. In fact, I should show you this. Let's see if I can refresh here. So that last run here, let's see if we look at the timing of this. Where did we run here? We probably started here. Okay, so we can see that like when it first ran, we get like, well, it probably started here. We get like 492 tokens in, we get 500 something out. Then the next one is 1,000 in, 600 out. Then 1,600, and then 24, 30. So we see how this is where the context is starting to stack and stack and stack. And we got to the point where it was sending 8,000 tokens in. We were getting 500 something back. Look at the cost of this. 0.000407. That's like fractions and fractions of a penny. I could generate, I don't know how many of those chapters. I could have 5 different versions of that chapter if I wanted to get different ideas and see what we get from it, that I can then formulate into one that I want at that price. And it's doing it really fast, 204 tokens per second. So this is a very, very powerful feature. And I know that in Chibi, we had some users hesitate to, because you connect your OpenRouter account when you use Chibi. So all this stuff is done using the token generation, the content generation is done using your OpenRouter account. And some people are worried about costs and things like that, but look at this. Fractions of a penny for 6,000 words. It costs them essentially nothing. It's practically free. You could probably create 100 of those before it's 100 of those. You just get into a penny-ish or 4 pennies maybe. Yeah, up after 100 of those. So it's so cheap that of course I'm using Gemini Flash, but if you know what models you want to use and you understand their costs, I mean, things can be exceptionally cheap on the token front. So anyways, I hope that you found this interesting. It really is a good strategy, but if you need additional help, definitely hit us up in our Discord. Be glad to help you out with more. And this will be published eventually as a tutorial on our help center. It's not here yet. This video might be what, if you are watching this from the help center, hello from the past. This video might be what I use in the tutorial to showcase it in, as a video embedded in the guide that this might be where you're watching it from the future. So anyways, hope you enjoy it. Until next time, take care.